There is one name that appears in the holsters of Union soldiers during the Civil War, in the hands of cowboys crossing the American frontier, in the jungles of Vietnam, in the deserts of Iraq, and in the armories of over 50 nations across 5 continents. One name, stamped in steel, that defined what an American weapon looked and felt like for nearly 2 centuries. That name is Colt. From the very first revolving pistol ever sold commercially, to the rifle that became the backbone of NATO, Colt did not just manufacture weapons, it manufactured history. This is the story of every weapon Colt ever made, and the extraordinary journey of the company that armed the world, built an empire on gunpowder and precision steel, and then watched that empire slowly slip away. Chapter 1. The Man Who Changed Everything. It begins in 1836 in a small factory in Paterson, New Jersey. Samuel Colt, 21 years old, receives U.S. patent number 138 for a revolving cylinder firearm. The concept is simple and revolutionary at the same time. A single pistol that can fire multiple times without reloading. Nobody had made it work commercially before. The Colt Paterson, as the first model came to be known, was available in 5 configurations, from a compact pocket pistol to a full-size holster model. The Texas Navy ordered 180 of them in 1839, and Texas Rangers began carrying them against Comanche raiders on the frontier. But commercial success was elusive. The factory closed in 1842. Samuel Colt was left with nothing but a patent and a vision. What saved him was a war. In 1847, a former Texas Ranger named Captain Samuel Walker walked into Colt's life with a problem and a solution. The U.S. Army needed a more powerful sidearm for the Mexican-American War, and Walker had ideas. The 2 men collaborated on a design that became the Colt Walker, a massive .44 caliber revolver weighing 4.5 pounds, the most powerful repeating handgun in the world at that moment. Walker ordered 1,000 units on behalf of the Army. Colt was back in business. The Walker produced enough energy at the muzzle to rival a modern handgun cartridge, nearly 2 centuries before modern ballistic science existed. Walker himself was killed in Mexico before the war ended, but the gun that bore his name launched an industrial empire. By 1848, Colt had refined the Walker into the Dragoon series, a .44 caliber revolver built for the U.S. Army's mounted rifles. It sold over 20,000 units and found its way into the holsters of military officers across Europe and South America. Then came the 1849 pocket revolver, a lighter, more manageable design chambered in .31 caliber. It became one of the best-selling firearms of the entire 19th century, with over 325,000 produced, carried by gold rush miners, merchants, and travelers from California to the streets of London. In 1853, Colt opened a factory in England, the first American manufacturer to operate a production facility on foreign soil, exporting not just weapons, but the very concept of mass-produced precision firearms to the world. The Colt Navy Model 1851 followed, a .36 caliber revolver that became one of the most iconic handguns of the century. Its cylinder was engraved with a scene from a Texas naval battle, a detail that gave the gun a storytelling quality no competitor could match. Over 215,000 were produced. Union and Confederate soldiers carried it. So did lawmen, gamblers, and gunslingers. The 1851 Navy was not just a weapon. It was a cultural artifact. Chapter 2. The Gun That Won the West. By 1855, Colt had completed a new armory in Hartford, Connecticut, overlooking the Connecticut River. It was the largest private armament factory on Earth, producing 150 weapons every single day. That same year, Colt introduced the 1855 revolving rifle, a cap and ball repeating long gun used by Union forces throughout the Civil War. It was Colt's first successful entry into the rifle market, and it set the tone for what would come. Samuel Colt died in 1862 at age 47, leaving behind a company worth millions and a legacy that his wife, Elizabeth Jarvis Colt, would continue to grow for decades. But the greatest single product in Colt's history arrived in 1873. The Colt Single Action Army, the Peacemaker. A 6-shot revolver chambered in .45 Colt, adopted immediately as the standard U.S. military service revolver, a position it held until 1892. It was offered in over 30 different calibers and multiple barrel lengths. Over 357,000 were produced in the first generation alone, and production has continued across 3 generations to this day, with total output exceeding 1 million units. General George Patton carried an ivory-handled single-action army throughout World War II. It was the weapon of sheriffs and outlaws, of cavalry troopers and ranch hands. No other single firearm has been more deeply embedded in the mythology of America. 5 years after the Peacemaker, Colt introduced the 1878 Hammer shotgun, a 12-gauge double-barrel that became one of the most powerful sporting and self-defense firearms available at the time. Then, in 1883, came the Colt Burgess, a lever-action rifle that entered the market with excellent reviews, only to be quietly discontinued 2 years later. The reason is one of the more entertaining footnotes in firearms history. Winchester threatened to begin producing revolvers if Colt did not exit the lever-action market. The two giants reached a gentleman's agreement, and Colt stepped back. The Colt Burgess remains a curiosity, a road not taken. In 1889, Colt introduced the Model 1889 Navy, the first double-action revolver in history, to feature a swing-out cylinder. It sounds like a technical detail, but it changed everything. The swing-out cylinder made reloading faster and safer than any revolver that had come before. The U.S. Navy ordered 5,000 immediately. Subsequent improved versions secured additional Army and Navy contracts, and the design template Colt established that year became the foundation for virtually every modern revolver produced anywhere in the world. Chapter 3: John Browning and the Age of Steel. In 1895, Colt introduced the Model 1895, a machine gun designed by John Moses Browning, the most important firearms engineer in American history. Powered by gas operation and nicknamed the potato digger for the distinctive lever that swung downward with each shot, it was the first successful gas-operated machine gun adopted by any military force. The U.S. used it in the Spanish-American War. Imperial Russia imported it for use in the Russo-Japanese War. It was not perfect, but it opened a door that would never close. Browning and Colt were one of the most productive partnerships in industrial history. In 1900, Colt introduced their first semi-automatic pistol, the Model 1900, chambered in .38 ACP. It was a completely new type of handgun, operating on short recoil principles that Browning had developed, and it set a new standard for military sidearm design. The Model 1902 followed, then the Model 1903 pocket hammerless, a compact .32 ACP pistol so well made and so reliable that it was adopted by the military forces of over 30 countries. The Model 1903 was also the personal sidearm of General Douglas MacArthur and was carried by countless American officers throughout both world wars. But the pinnacle of the Browning-Colt collaboration arrived in 1911. After years of military trials, competitive testing, and head-to-head evaluations against every major pistol manufacturer in the world. The Colt M1911 was officially adopted as the standard sidearm of the United States Armed Forces. A single-action, recoil-operated .45 ACP semi-automatic pistol that held 7 rounds in the magazine. It passed its adoption trials without a single malfunction across 6,000 rounds of testing. The U.S. military would carry it for the next 74 years. Total Colt deliveries to the U.S. government alone reached approximately 2.5 million units across both world wars. The M1911A1, a refined version introduced in 1924 with a shorter trigger, arched mainspring housing, and improved grip safety, extended the design's service life well into the modern era. Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Norway, and Spain all licensed or copied it. It remains in service with U.S. Special Operations units today, more than a century after it was first designed. Alongside the pistol, Colt was producing machine guns and automatic rifles that would define the Allied war effort. Under contract and license, Colt manufactured the Browning M1917 and M1919 machine guns, water-cooled and air-cooled respectively, which became the backbone of U.S. infantry firepower in both world wars and were exported to Britain, France, Canada, and dozens of other Allied nations. In the 1920s came the Colt Monitor, a licensed variant of the Browning automatic rifle, built specifically for law enforcement and exported to South American military and police forces. The Thompson submachine gun, produced by Colt in limited quantities in the early 1920s, added the most recognizable SMG of the era to their catalog and opened doors to police and government contracts worldwide. In 1927, Colt introduced the Detective Special, a compact snub-nose revolver that would remain in continuous production until 1997, a 70-year run that speaks for itself. Adopted by law enforcement agencies across the United States and exported to police forces on every continent, the Detective Special was followed by the official police revolver, which exceeded 1 million units produced and became the standard sidearm for American police departments for decades. By 1950, Colt had added the Cobra revolver, a lightweight aluminum frame variant that extended their law enforcement reach. And in 1955 came the Python, widely regarded as the finest double-action revolver ever produced in series, its trigger pull and barrel accuracy unmatched by any competitor then or since. The Python was exported globally, coveted by military officers, police forces, and collectors across dozens of countries. The snake gun family, which would eventually include the Diamondback in 1966, the King Cobra in 1986, and the Anaconda in 1990, became one of the most iconic revolver lineups in firearms history. Chapter 4: The Rifle That Armed the Planet. In December 1959, Colt made what would prove to be the most consequential business decision in its history. It purchased the manufacturing and marketing rights to the AR-15 from Armalite, a division of the Fairchild Engine Corporation, for a sum that, in retrospect, must rank among the greatest deals ever made in the arms industry. The AR-15 had been designed by Eugene Stoner between 1956 and 1959 as a scaled-down, lightweight alternative to the heavier battle rifles of the era. Chambered in .223 Remington, it weighed less than 7 pounds fully loaded. The U.S. military establishment was skeptical. Colt was not. Colt's first government contract for the rifle, which the military designated the M16, covered 104,000 units for the U.S. Air Force. The Army followed, then the Marines. By the time American forces were deploying in strength to Vietnam, the M16 was the standard infantry rifle of the United States Armed Forces. Early combat exposed serious reliability problems, jamming issues caused by incompatible ammunition and the absence of cleaning equipment in the field. Congressional investigations, combat reports, and design revisions followed. By 1967, the M16A1 had corrected the critical flaws. It received a forward assist, a chrome-lined bore, an improved flash suppressor, and a revised buffer system. From that point forward, the M16 performed, and it spread. The CAR-15 Commando, designated XM177, arrived in 1966 as a compact carbine version developed for special operations forces and air crews who needed something shorter and lighter than the standard rifle. It was exported to South Vietnamese special forces, Israeli commandos, and elite units across the Middle East. Its collapsible stock and shortened barrel gave it a profile that would define special operations weapons for the next 4 decades. The M16 platform grew in parallel. Colt licensed production to South Korea's Daewoo Precision Industries, to Jalisco in the Philippines, and to Dayamaco in Canada. Total production of the M16 family across all manufacturers exceeded 8 million units, second only to the AK-47 in global military distribution. The M16A2, adopted in the early 1980s, brought NATO standard ammunition compatibility, a heavier barrel, and 3-round burst capability. It became the service rifle not only of the U.S. Armed Forces, but of 55 countries across the globe. U.S. foreign aid programs, which required allied nations to purchase weapons compatible with American military standards, effectively locked Colt into the role of default global supplier for an entire generation of armies. In 1969, Colt and AAI Corporation co-developed the M203 grenade launcher, a single-shot 40mm weapon designed to attach directly beneath the barrel of the M16. It replaced earlier standalone launchers and gave every infantry soldier access to indirect fire capability without carrying a separate weapon system. The M203 became standard issue across the U.S. military and was exported to the armed forces of dozens of allied nations, remaining in frontline service for over 4 decades. That same decade, Colt's engineers developed the SCAMP, a compact select-fire machine pistol chambered in a proprietary 5.56mm cartridge. The U.S. military rejected it, but it found interest in export markets where its compact firepower addressed specific tactical requirements. In 1982, Colt introduced the Model 635, a 9mm submachine gun developed specifically for law enforcement and export customers, adopted by police and military units in over 24 countries. The Colt Canada C7 and C8 arrived in 1984, direct developments of the M16A2 platform built by the former Dayamaco facility, and became the standard service rifles of the Canadian Armed Forces. Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway adopted them as well, cementing Colt's presence at the heart of NATO's infantry arsenal. The M16A4, the final evolution of the M16 series, was adopted by the U.S. Marines in the 1990s and exported to Iraq, Afghanistan, and dozens of allied nations rebuilding their forces in the post-Cold War era. Colt purchased Dayamaco outright in 2005, renaming it Colt Canada, bringing direct production of rifles for 4 NATO allies under the Colt corporate umbrella. That same year, the M4 carbine, the shortened and modernized M16 successor the U.S. military had adopted in the early 1990s, was formally established as the standard issue weapon of all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. The M4A1, the fully automatic variant developed for special operations, was being carried by elite units on every continent. In 2012, The U.S. Marine Corps awarded Colt the M45 close-quarter battle pistol contract, a modernized M1911A1 variant that brought the original John Browning design back into active service for the 21st century. It was Colt's last major military pistol contract. There was also an experiment that history barely remembers. The Colt ACR, or Advanced Combat Rifle, developed in 1988 for a U.S. Army program seeking a next-generation replacement for the M16, featured duplex ammunition technology designed to increase hit probability at combat ranges. It was never adopted. But it demonstrated that Colt was still reaching, still trying to define what came next. Chapter 5. The Throne Lost. By the time the 21st century arrived, the cracks in Colt's empire were visible to anyone paying attention. In 1985, workers at the Hartford factory, members of the United Auto Workers Union, launched a strike over wages that would last nearly 5 years, one of the longest labor walkouts in American industrial history. Quality declined. Efficiency collapsed. Competitors moved faster. In 1989, following a mass shooting in Stockton, California, Colt voluntarily suspended civilian sales of semi-automatic rifles, a decision that cost the company enormous market share and goodwill at precisely the moment the civilian AR-15 market was beginning its long expansion. By the 1990s, Colt's key patents on the AR-15 platform had expired. Hundreds of manufacturers began producing their own versions legally, and the platform Colt had once exclusively controlled became the most competed-over product category in American firearms history. Colt had ceded that ground without a fight. Military contracts followed. Colt lost major M4 procurement business when competing manufacturers successfully challenged the sole source contracting process, forcing Colt to compete on price for the first time in decades. By 2015, the weight of nearly $400 million in secured debt had become impossible to carry. On June 14th of that year, Colt Defense LLC filed for voluntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in Delaware. It was not the first time. Colt had done the same in 1992 before being rescued by private investment. This time, the company emerged under the control of Science Capital Management, but never regained its footing. In February 2021, Colt was acquired by the Czech firearms conglomerate Česká zbrojovka Group for approximately $220 million, including assumed debt. 166 years of American ownership ended quietly, with a transaction on a balance sheet. The market Colt once dominated did not disappear. It simply changed hands. Sig Sauer won the U.S. Army's pistol contract in 2017, replacing the M9 Beretta with the M17 and M18, filling the Iatsuchikoka role the M1911 had held for 74 years. In 2022, Sig Sauer won the next-generation squad weapon program with the XM5 rifle and XM250 machine gun, replacing the very M4 and M16 platform that Colt had controlled for 60 years. Glock captured American law enforcement through the 1990s and 2000s by offering cheaper, lighter, higher-capacity pistols that departments could not ignore. FN America secured the M249, M240, and M16A4 production contracts that had once flowed to Colt. Barrett, founded in Tennessee in 1982, built an entire anti-materiel rifle category around the .50 caliber M82, a market Colt had never entered. Today, over 500 manufacturers produce AR-15 pattern rifles in the United States alone, generating billions in annual revenue that flows to every company in the industry, except the one that started it all. Since 1836, More than 30 million revolvers, pistols, and rifles bearing the Colt name have been produced. The Patterson, the Walker, the Dragoon, the Pocket, the Navy, the Peacemaker, the Python, the M1911, the M16, the M4, and every model in between. No single American manufacturer has shaped the way wars are fought, the way weapons are made, or the way a nation imagines itself across as many decades and across as many continents. The name on the barrel was not just a brand. It was a statement about what American industrial power could do when it was pointed in a single direction. That chapter is over now, but the steel it left behind will be firing for generations yet to come.